Our final guest this evening was born in Guatemala and has lived in Chicago for the last 30 years. Almost 3 years ago, he told his first story as a way to get over the stuttering that had plagued his childhood. Since then, he's been telling stories all over the United States and has won 30 Moth Slams and 2 Grand Slams. He also produces, hosts, and curates his own storytelling show, 80 Minutes Around the World, which showcases the stories of immigrants and allies. He's currently working on a book, a collection of poems, and a collection of short stories. Please welcome back to Tuesday Funk, Nestor Gomez.
So about 30 years ago, I came to this country. And I went to high school. And I knew several things when I was in high school. I knew that I was undocumented. My mother had already got her immigration status, and she had brought me and my siblings to this country, but we had come here undocumented. So I knew that I was undocumented. And I knew that in order for me to become a citizen, there were several things that I needed to do. One, I needed to get my immigration papers in order. That was something that my mother was already working on because she had applied for me and my siblings so we could become residents and probably citizens. Two, I knew that I needed to learn a lot about history of the United States. Well, I was already in high school. And I also knew that I needed to learn to speak English, another thing that high school was taking care of. I also knew that I needed to learn history of the United States and English so I could pass a constitution test once I got the chance to become a citizen of the United States. Well, I was in high school, I was learning English, I was learning history, and on my last year of high school, my history class was all about the Constitution of the United States and the history of the United States. So I started to study like crazy. I was already a nerd. So studying really hard was not really a problem for me. So I studied really, really hard. The day of the Constitution test, our history teacher told us, you're gonna have 1 hour to answer all the 100 questions on the test. 1 hour. And if I see anybody copying or trying to copy, I will take the test away from you, and you will not pass the test, and you will not graduate from high school. So I got down to work. And I almost finished the test. But I was one of the few that almost finished the test. So when the teacher started to collect the test and noticed that most of the students had barely answered half of the questions of the test, she decided, okay, I'm gonna give you 1 more day to answer the questions. Tomorrow, you'll get a chance to answer the question that you couldn't answer. So okay, I said, fine, let's do this tomorrow. The next day, the teacher didn't show up to work. She got sick. So they sent a substitute teacher instead. Well, I have this test here that your teacher gave me to pass it around, he said, as he passed the test around. Immediately, one of my classmates came over to me and started to ask questions for my test. Excuse me, young man, the substitute teacher asked, are you allowed to be doing that? Now, I was freaking out because I was very shy. I used to stutter at the time, so I didn't know what to say. I was like, but my classmate was like, oh yeah, this is just a practice test. Oh, okay, go ahead, the substitute teacher said, going back to his desk and reading his book. Immediately, everybody just got up and started to ask questions to everybody, and I copied. Somehow my test was taken away from my desk and started to be passed around. Well, the next week the teacher came back and she announced proudly that everybody had passed the test. I knew then that my hard work had paid off. Sadly, my success at school didn't quite translate to success on my personal life. Right after high school, I married my high school sweetheart. This complicated things for me not only financially, but also because my mother had applied for me as a single son of a registered alien. I wasn't supposed to get married. So a couple of years down the line, when I received a letter from the immigration office to show up to the immigration office for an appointment, they looked at my record and they realized that I was married, so they denied my immigration papers. So my mom started to fill out my paperwork again as a married son of an alien. And when my immigration appointment came back 5 years later, I showed up. But by then I was divorced. So my mom told me again to fill out my paperwork as a single man of a citizen, because by now she had become a citizen. So a couple of years down the line, when the immigration department called me again for another appointment, I showed up. By then I was married to another woman. So that delayed my process. And a few years down the line, they sent me another appointment to show up to immigration. But by then, I had gotten divorced again. So yes, I complicated my immigration process quite a bit. It wasn't until last month, at the beginning of last month, after I had finally been a resident for a few years, that I received a letter on the mail announcing that I was to show up at the immigration office for my citizenship test. Now, I immediately went online and I see what the questions are going to be. There were a couple of questions about history. When was the Declaration of Independence signed? July 4, 1776. Why are there 50 stars on the American flag? Well, because it represents every state. And questions like that. And I studied really hard again, every single question. I mean, I have been getting ready for this speaking test for 30 years now. But just in case, I decided that I was going to study again really hard. So I asked my third and present wife, yeah, there's some things that I don't learn. I asked her to help me study for the test. So she took all the questions and answers, and she kept asking me the questions, see if I could answer them properly. And I answered all of them properly. There were only two questions that I had problems with. Question number 1. Who is the Vice President of the United States? The fake Christian, homophobic, good for nothing. Relax. Relax. Take a deep breath. Relax. My wife would say, for the 100th time. Relax. Hence, I'll answer after a few minutes. Question number 2. Who is the President of the United States? The cheater, liar, immigrant, hating, son of the... Hey. They're not going to let you become a citizen if you can answer in that way. My wife will remind me for the 100th time. And for the 100th time, I would be so mad that I didn't get my papers fixed earlier, so I could have said, Obama! Instead of taking a big, long breath, calming down for 10 minutes until finally saying, Trump. Luckily for me, when I went to my immigration appointment and I went for a test, I wasn't asked any of those two questions. I was asked several other questions, but once that person in charge saw that I could answer them and that I could speak English properly, they dismissed me. They told me to go home and wait for a letter. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at home when I received the letter. And I can tell you, I can count with one hand the number of letters that I have opened in my life that have made me cry. The letter that I received telling me that I could go to my citizenship oath ceremony is one of those. March 15th of this year, I was finally able to go in front of a judge and take my oath ceremony. And when they finally gave me the paper that certifies me as a USA citizen, I was finally able to say, God damn, I passed the test. Well, I'm a storyteller. I started telling stories about 3 years ago when I put my name on the hat, and I just, as a way to get over my fear of stuttering, I say I'm gonna go do a public speaking event, and I went, put my name on the hat, and I told my first story, and I haven't stopped telling stories since then. But I used to write a lot of poetry before I started telling stories or writing stories or doing storytelling. I had never shared my poems, any of my poems in public. Most of them are in Spanish, and I have a few of them in English. But I'm working on a book of poetry, so well, I hope that you like this one. It's called Perdón, which means I'm sorry. And it talks about my stuttering, my childhood, and all the problems that I deal with in my childhood, including the fact that I was sexually abused as a kid. So. Perdón, for thinking that it was your fault, that I had a tangled up tongue that asphyxiated my words, killing them slowly with stuttering groans. Perdón, because in that reclusive hush, I learned to organize my thoughts, writing down my feelings when I couldn't talk. And it was in that silence that I found my voice. For the day that I asked, where were you when I got hurt? When I was weak and my enemy strong. When my innocent childhood ended, when I was still too young. Perdón. Because you put that strength inside of my soul to help me get back on my feet in spite of being hurt. To help myself and those that cannot carry this cross. For the days when I cursed my luck, and living in the misery of a country of a third world, raised between poverty, disease, and war. Perdón. Because it was there that I learned the benefit of hard work. Learning that honesty, help, and love have much more value than precious gold. For the day I turned my back at you and refused to pray. When life went wrong and I lost my faith, I took my leave and I became astray. Perdón. Because you always kept me safe. Even as I stormed off and walked away, you guided my steps to where I am today. Perdón, for my ego and my vanity, fueled by my childishness and stupidity. Perdón, for my rage and obstinacy, sustained by my fear and incompetency. Perdón, that it took me so long to understand that God, oh God, you do work in mysterious ways. Thank you.